All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 20, Episode 12, titled The Unkindest Cut. You know, the opening theme song? They still play that thing. It's like they're apologizing for what's about to happen. It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. Yeah, and then they show you exactly that, but with more jokes about blind toddlers. And then that classic line, "Lucky there's a Family Guy." Oh, are we? Are we lucky? Because sometimes after watching an episode like this, I'm not so sure. Lois gets an invite to her fancy private high school reunion, Fancington's Academy for Insufferable Girls, because of course she went to a school named after being insufferable. Their mascot? A woman yelling out of LA. Sounds about right. She's already fretting about bringing Peter, which, honestly, is a valid concern. Nobody wants Peter at their fancy reunion, especially if he's wearing a banana suit and trying to sell them stocks. She confides in Brian, who, surprise, surprise, is available. "Brian, you are so predictable. It's like watching a nature documentary about a guy who tries to date his owner's wife." Meanwhile, Peter's just chilling, reading a book he found on a plane. His entire literary taste is basically whatever gets left behind in a seat pocket. Da Vinci Code 4 times? Seriously? That's like saying you've watched The Notebook 4 times and actually enjoyed it. Then Lois pulls the old "I want to impress my stuffy classmates" move. She asks Quagmire to pretend to be her husband. Quagmire, the guy who thinks no is just a suggestion. This is already a disaster waiting to happen, and we haven't even gotten to the part where they have to dispose of a dead pizza guy. This episode really wants to lean into the Lois is secretly embarrassed by Peter trope. It's not a new angle, but they really crank it up to 11 here. She's worried about her old classmates judging Peter, who, let's be honest, would probably insult their pearls before they even had a chance to judge him. But the real kicker is the lies she's telling the kids. A weekend at the Museum of Dusty Vases? Come on, Lois, even they know that's a terrible lie. You're going to a reunion, not on a covert mission to steal antique porcelain. And then the pizza situation. Oh, the pizza situation. Lois says no pizza, your weight is a reflection on me, which is hilarious because the show is built on Peter's ever-expanding waistline. But then Peter's like, "Fine, but I'm going to tweet mean stuff at celebrities that look vaguely like you." Ah, the modern man's passive-aggressive response. It's so much better than an actual confrontation, isn't it? And Meg, bless her heart, she's the only one who seems to catch on to Lois's scheme. She immediately knows Lois is going to the reunion with Quagmire. Lois's immediate response? Fetch. Honestly, the way Lois treats Meg sometimes is just brutal. It's like she's actively trying to make Meg's life worse. Anyway, Quagmire is already thinking about the honeymoon suite. He sees a woman's luggage and immediately starts sweating. Hairdryer, iron, free weights, CPAP machine, travel Peloton, every robe she's ever owned, her desktop computer. This is less a weekend trip and more Lois moving in for a month. Quagmire's optimism about them sleeping in separate rooms like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt? Adorable. So adorable. And then the pizza guy shows up. And then he dies. On their toilet. Because of course he does. Family Guy never misses an opportunity to put a dead body in the most inconvenient place possible. And the kids' immediate reaction isn't horror, it's, "Mom's gonna find out we had pizza." This is what happens when your parents weaponize food. The honeymoon suite? Oh, Peter's thrilled. This is the honeymoon suite? No, Peter, it's just the honeymoon suite, and you're going to ruin it. Quagmire's smooth talk about being a platinum member? Pure delusion. He thinks they upgraded them because he's so special. Meanwhile, Lois is probably just trying to divorce Peter in her head while Quagmire tries to sexually harass the front desk clerk. The absolute worst part? The thought of the windowless single room with no water pressure. That's the real horror story here. Quagmire, ever the gentleman, assures Lois he'll be a better man than John Wayne Bobbitt with his second wife. That's not a high bar, Glenn. Not a high bar at all. And then they have to deal with the body, the dead pizza guy. And the immediate thought is, how do we hide this so Mom doesn't find out? Chris's idea of putting a yarmulke on him and dumping him in the town square to frame it as a hate crime? Peak Family Guy logic. Where are you even going to find a yarmulke on short notice? Float him with balloons like an Up? Chris, you're a genius. And then the pizza guy gets a text. Oh, this just keeps getting better. Now they have to deliver the pizzas themselves. It's the ultimate boy who cried wolf scenario, but with more dead bodies and less sheep. Meg gets the brilliant idea of taking the iPad, because of course she does, anything to get away from the chaos at home. The reunion scene? Lois is trying so hard to be this sophisticated woman, and Quagmire is just Quagmire. He's a pilot who reads books. He's trying to sound like a respectable husband, but he's a dog. A horny, horny dog. Madison, Lexington, Broadway, Vivian Yacht Brunch, Scowlly Titanus. These names are genuinely inspired. It's like they took every old money stereotype and smashed them together. And the compliment Lois gives Quagmire? You have the breasts of an obese woman and the arms of an anorexic. Wow, Lois, really laying on the charm there. And Peter? He's back home, presumably watching TV and eating pizza, completely oblivious. Or is he? He tweets mean stuff at celebrities. It's his way of fighting back. The pizza delivery kids are now driving around in a dead guy's car delivering pizzas. It's like a dark, twisted version of Fast and Furious. And then they have to put Meg in the dead guy's clothes to make him look like a scarecrow. Meg, you are the MVP of this entire episode. You are literally becoming a corpse for your family. You know, for someone who's supposedly a terrible character, Meg sure gets put through the ringer in these episodes. And then the police station stop. Brilliant. The place with the most cameras. And then the cadaver dog training facility. Because why wouldn't you take a dead body to a place designed to find dead bodies? It's like they're actively trying to get caught. And Chris's line about being starved for human contact and the body not being fully cold yet? That's a disturbingly honest take from Chris. And then Peter is at home, completely alone, ordering another pizza, oblivious to the chaos his family is causing. The reunion scene wraps up with Lois getting a standing ovation for comparing the estate tax to the Holocaust. I mean, that's a bold take, Lois. Very bold. Quagmire's response to Lois thanking him? I want you to meet the cocktail waitress I'm about to sleep with. Classy, Glenn. Real classy. And then Lois is back at the hotel, alone, looking at the business center as her only hope for human interaction. Meanwhile, Peter is at home, telling Lois about his night of performing on a 4-inch thick futon. Oh, Peter, you have no idea. This episode is basically a masterclass in how not to handle a dead body and how to completely embarrass your spouse at a reunion. The entire premise is built on Lois's insecurities and Peter's obliviousness, with Quagmire being the wild card that predictably makes everything worse. It's a classic Family Guy structure. A ridiculous premise, escalating chaos, and absolutely no one learning a lesson. You know, if you're liking this breakdown and want to see more deep dives into this glorious mess of a show, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps us keep this dumpster fire of content going. Now, let's dive into this episode's story and see just how much chaos they managed to pack in. The episode starts with Lois getting that dreaded invitation to her high school reunion, the Fancington's Academy for Insufferable Girls. Immediately, her mind goes to Peter and how he'd inevitably ruin everything. This is the surface-level conflict. Lois wants to impress her old, stuffy classmates, and Peter is the antithesis of that. But beneath that, the episode is really digging into Lois's lifelong struggle with her own privileged upbringing and her complicated feelings about Peter. She loves him, sure, but there's this constant undercurrent of embarrassment, this fear that he's too crude, too loud, too Peter. She uses the reunion as an excuse to escape Peter and his lowbrow tastes, particularly his love for pizza, which she's declared off-limits because, apparently, her children's weight reflects on her. That's a whole other can of worms, right? The pressure on kids to be thin because their parents are shallow. Meanwhile, Peter, blissfully unaware, is left to fend for himself, which in this case means a pizza-fueled rebellion with the kids. The side plot, or perhaps the main plot, depending on how you look at it, kicks off when the pizza delivery guy meets his untimely end on the Griffin's toilet. This is where the real chaos ignites. Instead of calling the authorities, the family decides to become amateur morticians and pizza delivery drivers. It's a classic Family Guy move. Take an unfortunate accident and spiral it into a Rube Goldberg machine of increasingly absurd and illegal activities. The theme here is definitely about escapism and denial. Lois is escaping her reality with Peter by going to the reunion with Quagmire. The kids are escaping Lois's dietary restrictions with pizza. And the whole family is escaping the reality of a dead body by trying to cover it up. The episode feels a bit disjointed, as many Family Guy episodes do. The reunion plot and the dead body plot feel like two separate episodes stitched together. Lois's interactions with Quagmire at the reunion are supposed to mirror her own feelings about Peter, highlighting his boorishness versus Quagmire's supposed sophistication. But Quagmire's inherent creepiness undermines that pretty quickly. The writing itself is a mixed bag. Some jokes land, particularly the ones involving the absurd names and backgrounds of Lois's classmates. The sheer audacity of their wealth and snobbery is pretty funny. But the plot mechanics, particularly the family's competence, or lack thereof, in dealing with the body, stretch believability even for Family Guy. The pacing is rapid-fire, which is standard for the show, but it sometimes sacrifices character development or logical progression for the sake of a gag. You get the sense that the writers were more focused on cramming in as many jokes as possible, even if it meant the plot became a little nonsensical. Visually, it's standard Family Guy fare, nothing particularly groundbreaking, but the animation is fluid enough to convey the slapstick and the absurdity. The scene where they're trying to get the body into the car is a good example of their physical comedy. My personal verdict on this episode, it's a pretty middle-of-the-road Family Guy installment. It has its moments of dark humor and absurdity, but it doesn't really break new ground. The Lois and Quagmire storyline feels a little recycled, and the dead body plot, while providing plenty of opportunities for gags, ultimately goes nowhere particularly meaningful. It's an episode that exists, provides some laughs, and then promptly disappears from your memory. It sits as a fairly standard filler episode for Season 20, neither a highlight nor a low point. Just there. It doesn't really contribute much to any overarching character arcs, and the jokes, while sometimes clever, aren't memorable enough to elevate it beyond average. Let's talk about that moment when Lois receives the invitation to her high school reunion. She's holding this fancy, embossed envelope, and you can practically see the dread radiating off her. She immediately launches into this internal monologue about how Peter will ruin it, how her classmates are so much more refined. The way she says, Fancington's Academy for Insufferable Girls, it's dripping with sarcasm, but you also know she's genuinely worried. She even calls it a private gross matter, as if discussing her husband's potential presence is akin to uncovering a family secret. The visual of the letter butler, a dog in a tiny suit, taking the envelope to the refuse is a classic Family Guy exaggeration of Lois's attempt to maintain an image of sophisticated control. It works because it perfectly encapsulates her character's internal conflict. She's from a wealthy background, she has these ingrained ideas of class and decorum, but she's married to Peter, the human embodiment of the opposite. It's funny because it's relatable for anyone who's ever felt a pang of embarrassment about a loved one's social faux pas, but amplified to cartoonish levels. What this moment is really trying to say is that Lois is still deeply affected by her upbringing and her social circles. Even though she's chosen a life with Peter, a part of her still craves the approval of her old world, and she fears Peter will always be the barrier to that. It reveals her insecurity about her life choices and how she perceives Peter's place in the world she once belonged to. If I were writing it, maybe instead of the dog butler, it would be a robotic butler that glitches and calls Peter a low-class peasant before it takes the letter. That would add another layer of Peter-related commentary right from the start. Or perhaps instead of just a dog, it's Herbert, the elderly neighbor, who then makes a creepy comment about the reunion. I'm personally annoyed by how quickly she dismisses Peter's potential presence. It's like, give the guy a chance. He might surprise you. Though, knowing Peter, she's probably right. Next up, the infamous pizza delivery guy incident. This is pure, unadulterated Family Guy chaos. The poor guy makes his delivery, asks to use the bathroom, and then he's dead, on the toilet. The camera lingers on the family's reaction, a mixture of shock and, more importantly, panic about Lois finding out. Peter's immediate concern isn't the dead body, it's, your mother is going to find out we had pizza. That's the core of his motivation right there, avoiding Lois's wrath, not morality. This moment works because it's so unexpected and so darkly humorous. The mundane act of ordering pizza suddenly becomes a catalyst for a murder cover-up. The absurdity of the situation is amplified by the family's immediate, almost instinctual decision to hide the evidence rather than call the police. It's a perfect example of Family Guy's nihilistic humor. Bad things happen, and the characters react in the most selfish, ridiculous ways possible. What this scene is really saying is that family dysfunction is the ultimate driver of the plot. Their inability to communicate honestly, their fear of Lois's judgment, and their general lack of common sense are what propel the entire episode forward. It's a commentary on how fear can lead people to make incredibly stupid decisions. In my version, the pizza guy wouldn't die on the toilet. He'd die trying to escape the house because he saw something he shouldn't have, like Peter wearing a clown wig and juggling flaming bowling pins. That way, the body is still there, but the setup is even more bizarre and Peter-centric. I get a perverse thrill from how casually they accept the death. It's like, oh, a dead guy? Okay, what's for dinner? It's disturbing, but also undeniably funny. Then we have Lois's decision to ask Quagmire to pose as her husband. This is a pivotal moment that fuels the episode's main conflict. She's sitting with Quagmire, trying to explain the situation, and he's already got that gleam in his eye. The dialogue is classic Quagmire. "I'm not used to wearing rings above the waist, but what the hell? I'll try anything once." This immediately tells you this is going to be a disaster. Lois is trying to play it cool, thinking she can control Quagmire, while he's clearly seeing this as a green light for infidelity. The scene is set up to highlight Lois's desperation and her questionable judgment. She's willing to compromise her principles and potentially her marriage to impress people she clearly despises. The visual of them in a somewhat clandestine meeting, away from the family, emphasizes the secrecy and the moral ambiguity of her plan. This works because it taps into the inherent creepiness of Quagmire and the foolishness of Lois's plan. It's a recipe for disaster, and the audience knows it. It's funny because we anticipate the inevitable train wreck. What this moment is trying to say is that sometimes people will go to extreme lengths to gain social acceptance, even if it means putting themselves in compromising and unethical situations. It explores Lois's deep-seated insecurities about her place in the world and her fear of judgment. She's willing to use Quagmire as a prop, essentially objectifying him for her own social gain, which is pretty messed up, actually. My alternative? Lois asks Quagmire to pretend to be her husband, but he mistakes it for a marriage proposal and starts planning their wedding with a terrified Lois trapped in the middle. The entire episode then becomes about her trying to get out of marrying Quagmire while still attending the reunion. I find Lois's naivete about Quagmire's intentions to be incredibly frustrating. She clearly knows what he's like, yet she believes she can manage him. It's classic Lois, overconfident in her ability to control situations and always ending up in hot water. The family's frantic attempt to hide the dead pizza guy's body and deliver his remaining pizzas is a goldmine of comedic moments. Peter, Chris, and Stewie are running around like headless chickens, arguing about what to do. Peter's insistence on pizza, even with a body in the house, is perfectly in character. Chris's suggestion to float him with balloons, like an Up, is a childishly brilliant, if impractical, idea. Stewie, ever the pragmatist with a dark streak, is probably calculating the most efficient way to dispose of the evidence. The visual of them trying to maneuver a stiff body out of the house, probably bumping into things and making loud thuds, is slapstick gold. This whole sequence works because it plays on the family's inherent incompetence and their shared fear of Lois. They're a unit, albeit a deeply flawed one, when it comes to hiding their transgressions from their matriarch. The absurdity of them becoming makeshift delivery drivers for a dead man's route is peak Family Guy. They are literally cleaning up someone else's mess while simultaneously creating their own bigger mess. What the sequence is trying to say is that family bonds, however dysfunctional, can sometimes lead to a shared sense of purpose, even if that purpose is to commit a crime. It's about the lengths they'll go to protect each other from external judgment, especially Lois's. It's a darkly comedic take on loyalty and problem-solving. My rewrite? They decide to use the dead body as a scarecrow in the backyard to keep birds away from Peter's prized tomato plants. They even give him a little hat and a fake cigarette. Then, when Lois comes back, they have to quickly hide the body and pretend nothing happened. I find the visual of Meg being volunteered to dress up in the dead guy's clothes to make him look more convincing to be particularly hilarious and pathetic. Meg is the ultimate fall guy in this family, always getting the worst jobs. It's funny because it's so unfair to her, but also it's exactly what we expect from this family. Let's talk about Lois's reunion party. The women are introduced with these ridiculously opulent and absurd descriptions. Madison, Lexington, Broadway, who runs a scholarship for underprivileged wasps who can only afford Cornell. Vivian Yacht Brunch, who sailed directly into the building. Scowlly Titanus, granddaughter of Henry Tite and Randolph Anus. These names and descriptions are pure satire, mocking the extreme wealth and pretentiousness of old money families. The humor comes from the sheer exaggeration and the ridiculousness of their claims. Lois, trying to fit in, also contributes her own lie about Peter. The visual of these women, all impeccably dressed, sitting around a table, trying to outdo each other with their stories of wealth and privilege, is a perfect setup for comedy. This works because it's a sharp jab at a specific social class. The writers are clearly having fun satirizing these archetypes. Lois's attempt to present Quagmire as her sophisticated husband, while he's clearly struggling to maintain the facade, adds another layer of humor. What this scene is trying to say is that appearances can be deceiving, and people will go to great lengths to project an image of success, even if it's based on lies and deception. It's a critique of superficiality and the social pressure to conform to certain standards of wealth and status. My take? Instead of Quagmire, Lois tries to pass off a mannequin as her husband, and hilarity ensues when it starts to fall apart during a toast. That would be a more visually comedic take on the deception. I'm amazed by the creativity of the character names. Scowlly Titanus is particularly inspired. It's the kind of name that is so over-the-top offensive that it becomes funny. The scene where Peter and the kids are trying to deliver the remaining pizzas, and they end up at the police station, is a stroke of genius in its terrible planning. The sheer panic when they realize where they are, and the subsequent frantic effort to ditch the pizzas and the body before they're caught, is a masterclass in comedic tension. Peter's desperate attempts to act normal, while clearly sweating bullets, are hilarious. Chris's usual dim-wittedness is actually a bit helpful here, as he's too oblivious to be truly panicked. Stewie, of course, is probably already planning their escape route. This sequence works because it takes the family's already ridiculous situation and puts them in an even more precarious position. The police station is the last place they should be, and the fact that they're there trying to deliver pizzas for a dead guy is peak Family Guy absurdity. It's funny because it's so stupidly risky. What this moment is really saying is that the Griffins are perpetually bad at covering up their mistakes. They consistently choose the worst possible options and somehow manage to dig themselves deeper into trouble. It's a commentary on their flawed decision-making and their tendency to compound problems. My alternative? They accidentally deliver the pizzas to a cult meeting, and the cult members think the dead body is a sacrifice. Then they have to escape a bizarre ritual. I find Peter's pathetic attempts to sound authoritative and in control while his kids are clearly panicking around him to be the funniest part. He's like a bad dad trying to lead his kids through a robbery. Then there's the cadaver dog training facility. This is where the absurdity truly peaks. The idea of bringing a dead body to a place that's designed to find dead bodies is so mind-numbingly stupid that it circles back around to being brilliant. The dogs' reactions, their excitement at finding Georgie, are depicted in a way that's both funny and a little unsettling. The family's utter panic as the dogs swarm the car and the body is revealed is the punchline. This scene works because it's the ultimate culmination of their terrible decision-making. They've gone from hiding a body to actively presenting it to the experts. It's the logical, albeit insane, conclusion to their cover-up attempt. The humor comes from the sheer irony of the situation. What this moment is really saying is that some messes are just too big to hide, and sometimes your best efforts to conceal something will only draw more attention to it. It's a darkly comic exploration of the futility of their attempts to escape consequences. My rewrite? They decide to use the dead body as a prop in a low-budget horror film they're trying to shoot, and the cadaver dogs are just actors for the film. Then the real police show up because of complaints about the noise. I am genuinely impressed by the writer's commitment to pushing the boundaries of how dumb a character can be. Peter and the kids are operating on a level of logic that defies all reason, and it's hilarious. Finally, Lois's return and her conversation with Peter. She's trying to act like she had a sophisticated night, regaling Peter with tales of her triumph at the reunion, while Peter, oblivious, talks about his night of performing on a futon. The juxtaposition of their experiences is stark. Lois is clearly disappointed, realizing that Quagmire was no substitute for Peter, and that her attempt to impress her old friends was ultimately hollow. Peter, meanwhile, is just happy to have had a good night. This scene works because it brings the two main plot threads together and provides a moment of, albeit brief, character reflection for Lois. She realizes the artificiality of her reunion experience and the genuine, if messy, nature of her life with Peter. It's a subtle commentary on what truly matters in a relationship. What this moment is trying to say is that true happiness often lies in accepting your reality and the people in it, rather than constantly chasing an idealized version of success or acceptance. It's about the realization that even though Peter is crude and embarrassing, he's also her husband, and their life, however imperfect, is what she chose. My version? Lois comes back, completely disillusioned, and Peter, trying to cheer her up, presents her with a giant homemade pizza and a promise of a romantic night, which immediately gets interrupted by the arrival of the police to collect the pizza guy's body. It's a bittersweet ending. I find Lois's subtle realization that she actually misses Peter, despite her best efforts to escape him, to be the most compelling part of the episode. It's a rare moment of vulnerability for her, and it adds a touch of genuine emotion to an otherwise ridiculous plot. Let's do a quick heat check on the characters in this episode. Peter, as usual, is the oblivious id. His main contributions are his unwavering love for pizza and his attempts to avoid Lois's anger, culminating in the absurd pizza delivery mission. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but his actions, however dumb, drive the plot. His best moment is probably his insistence on tweeting mean things at celebrities as a form of protest. It's so petty and Peter-esque. I don't think this episode changes how I see him. He's consistently Peter. Lois is the anxious social climber. She's the one with the central conflict, desperately trying to impress her snobby classmates while simultaneously being embarrassed by her husband. Her decision to involve Quagmire is her most significant and frankly worst moment. It shows her desperation and her willingness to compromise her values for superficial acceptance. Her interactions with Quagmire at the reunion highlight her attempts to project an image of sophistication. This episode reinforces the idea that Lois is often her own worst enemy, constantly seeking external validation. Quagmire, predictably, is the lecherous wildcard. He's there to add a layer of sleaze and creepiness to Lois's reunion plot. His performance as Lois's husband is hilariously bad, and his immediate shift to hitting on other women shows his true colors. His attempt to be a gentleman by comparing himself to John Wayne Bobbitt with his second wife is peak Quagmire. Awful, but somehow still funny in its awfulness. He serves his purpose as a plot device to highlight Lois's poor decision-making. Brian, surprisingly, is mostly in an advisory role here, offering advice to Lois. He's the voice of reason, albeit a somewhat self-serving one, as he offers himself up as a replacement husband. He doesn't have a lot to do in this episode, but his presence highlights Lois's options and her ultimate choice, which is to go with the far more problematic Quagmire. Chris is the lovable idiot, contributing his usual nonsensical ideas, like floating the body with balloons. His enthusiasm for the pizza mission and his generally unbothered demeanor make him a good foil for Peter's frantic panic. He's used well to provide a specific type of humor. Stewie, on the other hand, is the calculating mastermind. While he's involved in the dead body shenanigans, he's likely the one doing most of the actual planning and thinking. His involvement in taking the iPad signifies his desire for convenience and control. He's the brains of the operation, even if the operation itself is utterly moronic. Meg, bless her heart, is once again the family's punching bag and scapegoat. Her agreeing to wear the dead guy's clothes to make him a scarecrow is her defining moment, and it's both hilarious and incredibly sad. She's the only one who truly suffers the physical indignities of the family's poor decisions. Her role reinforces her character as the eternally downtrodden, but strangely resilient member of the family. Let's dig into some of the hidden gems and Easter eggs in this episode that you might have missed. First off, the entire concept of Fancington's Academy for Insufferable Girls is a thinly veiled jab at elite boarding schools and the type of privileged, out-of-touch individuals they produce. The names of Lois's classmates like Madison, Lexington, Broadway, and Vivian Yacht Brunch are so over the top they verge on parody, but they're actually based on real archetypes of extreme wealth and entitlement. The subtle jab that the scholarship is for underprivileged wasps who can only afford Cornell is particularly sharp, implying that even among the elite, there are hierarchies and struggles, albeit ones that are utterly incomprehensible to the average person. Another gem is the specific mention of the Da Vinci Code as something Lois has read multiple times on planes. This isn't just a random book choice. It points to the kind of mainstream, somewhat trashy, yet popular literature that gets passed around in airports. It's a small detail that grounds Lois's character in a relatable, if slightly uninspired, habit. It also subtly suggests that Lois, despite her aspirations, has a taste for accessible, popular culture. Then there's Quagmire's reference to being a pilot and I read books. This is him trying to sound more intellectual and respectable, a stark contrast to his usual persona.
The books part is clearly an afterthought, a weak attempt to add gravitas. It's funny because it's so obviously a facade. The inclusion of the specific hotel chain perk, offering a suite to maintain the appearance of being married but sleeping separately, is a bit of insider commentary on how people navigate marital issues in public. It's a subtle nod to the performance aspect of relationships. The mention of Crackle as a streaming service is a fun little detail. Crackle was a real streaming service that existed for a while, known for its B-movies and older content. Its inclusion here adds a layer of modern, slightly dated pop culture reference that the show often uses to place itself in a specific cultural moment. The Dead Pizza Guy's band name, Special Delivery, is a pun that's so on the nose it's almost missed. It's a classic Family Guy move to have a character's band name be a literal description of their profession or fate. It's the kind of joke that flies by if you're not paying close attention to every single detail. Now, let's play the what-if game and see if we can improve this episode. First, the choice to have Lois ask Quagmire to pretend to be her husband. It's a decent premise for disaster, but it feels a little predictable for Quagmire. What if instead Lois decided to ask Brian? Imagine the awkwardness of Brian trying to be Lois's husband, with his own insecurities and his usual sanctimonious attitude. It would create a different kind of tension, focusing on Brian's failed attempts at sophistication and Lois's frustration with his holier-than-thou shtick. This would also lean into the ongoing dynamic between Lois and Brian, which often involves him trying to insert himself into her life in inappropriate ways. Another choice that could be tweaked is the family's immediate decision to cover up the pizza guy's death. While classic Family Guy, it could be made more interesting. What if, instead of just hiding the body, they tried to resurrect him using Stewie's advanced technology? Imagine the ensuing chaos of a reanimated, confused pizza guy trying to deliver pizzas and interact with the family. It would allow for more sci-fi absurdity and give Stewie a more prominent role in the dead body plot. It could also lead to some genuinely funny moments of the pizza guy being a zombie and the family trying to keep him under control. Finally, the ending where Lois returns and has a quiet moment of reflection with Peter. It's a bit too neat and tidy for Family Guy.
What if, as Lois is confiding in Peter, the dead pizza guy, still in the trunk of his car outside, suddenly sits up and demands his tip? That would bring the entire ridiculous plot back with a bang, reminding everyone that no lesson was learned and the chaos is never truly over. It would be a more abrupt and fittingly Family Guy conclusion. All right, let's wrap this up with a verdict. I'm giving this episode a 6.7 out of 10. Why 6.7? Because it has flashes of brilliance, but ultimately doesn't quite stick the landing. The premise of Lois's reunion and her desperate attempt to appear sophisticated while dealing with Peter and then Quagmire is a solid foundation for comedy, and some of the jokes about the elite classmates landed well. The dead body plot, while a bit overdone, provided the necessary chaos and dark humor that we expect from the show. The visual gags and the quick pacing kept it from being boring. However, the episode loses points for the predictable nature of the Quagmire storyline and the somewhat disjointed feel between the reunion plot and the cover-up plot. The ending, with Lois's quiet realization, felt a little too sentimental for a show that thrives on cynicism. This episode is really for the die-hard Family Guy fans who enjoy the show's specific brand of dark, absurd humor and aren't looking for deep character development or a cohesive narrative. The casual viewer might find it a bit too chaotic and nonsensical. What would have pushed the score higher? A more integrated plot that seamlessly blended Lois's reunion anxieties with the family's dead body predicament, and perhaps a more surprising twist to the ending. But as it stands, it's a perfectly average Family Guy episode, a solid 6-point-something. So, back to our opening hook, the show's continued reliance on the same old formula, from the opening theme song's nostalgic plea for values to Lois's desperate attempt to fit in with an old crowd, all while Peter and the kids accidentally kill a man and try to hide it. It's a testament to Family Guy's enduring, albeit sometimes frustrating, formula: chaos, absurdity, and very little in the way of lasting change. And somehow, against all odds, we keep watching.